Hey, before we get started, you know what this music means. That's right, kids. We have a new patron, the one and only Ralph from AskRalphPodcast.com. If you need any kind of taxing or if you're working with a small business, if you are a small business, check out the Ask Ralph podcast. You guessed it, AskRalphPodcast.com. So, and later we'll see, because now Ralph is on the wheel of names, and we will see if Ralph is selected randomly from the wheel of names. But Ralph, thank you so much for being an awesome supporter. You can be an awesome supporter by going over to AskThePodcastCoach.com/support. So with that, let me hit a couple buttons on the Roadcaster, and let's go back to doing the show. In theory, the music is done. Here we go. No, it's going to keep going. All right. Well, let's just do this. So well done. I'm just going to cut it off. Ask the Podcast Coach for January 20th, 2024. Oh, it's going to play them both. Wait, hold on. That's a train wreck.
You want to bring me back in?
I do want to bring you back in. Is this not a...
It's like runaway music.
It is. I'm like, stop! Stop it! Make it stop, Mommy. Make it stop. All right. There we go. And it goes, welcome to YouTube where Dave doesn't edit. Beautiful. But it does go something like this. Ask the Podcast Coach for January 20th, 2024.
Let's get ready to podcast.
Had to think about it. See, you change your intro, everything goes out the window. It's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there, he's going the distance. He's going for speed. It's the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. And Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Always good to be back with you. We've had 2 weekends with negative, like it's negative 15 right now, and it was negative 20 last weekend.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is it for the year. But welcome. It's always warm on Ask the Podcast Coach.
That's it. I was talking to somebody last night, and we said, hey, it's January in Ohio. Like, it's cold, it's nasty, and I normally go out grocery shopping on Friday because, that's how I party. And I was like, nah, I'm good. It's too cold out there. But there is an easy way to warm yourself up, of course, and that is with a piping hot cup of Java. And Jim's going to do the coffee pour there. And that, of course, is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you want to look good, whether that's artwork or a logo or your whole website, you got to go over to podcastbranding.co because, they see you before they hear you. And the beautiful thing about Mark is not only is he an award-winning graphic artist, he's a podcaster. So there's none of this having to explain that, it's kind of like a radio show, but it's not. And of course, he's Canadian, so it's going to be polite. And he's going to do things that you're just not going to get from that guy on Fiverr or girl. He's going to sit down with you one-on-one, figure out what your show is going to be, what you want it to be, and just make it fit like a glove. Because you really want that maximum impact. You got to stop the scroll, people. You got to stop the scroll, and you can do that with awesome artwork, websites, and other things from Mark over at podcastbranding.co.
Hold the phone. Take me home.
You ever tempted to sing that last little line?
I am.
I always want to. Big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, Based on a True Story, at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. This week, $2.99. He's close to $300, by the way. Darkest Hour with Furman Daniel, and I think that is a World War II about Churchill. So check that out. Based on a True Story podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
And of course, if you have a question, you can throw it into the chat if you're watching live. Also, if you're here live, you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/question and jump right into the video. But boy, do I have a question for you, Jim. I was asked this on a...
Excited.
Well, first of all, I have 3,000 subscribers to my YouTube channel. And yet, I get about, if I'm like rocking and rolling.
Yep. Yep.
200 views on a
Yep.
on a video, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you want to guess what I did that got me over 2,000?
What'd you do, Dave?
I did a short.
Oh.
And I was like, wait, what? Like, I've done
Yeah.
a few shorts.
Yeah.
And yesterday, I did a short. I had my guitar on, and I said, I love the guitar. I love to teach. And I said, but yet I don't know why. I hate teaching the guitar, mainly because people walk in and go, I want to play Eruption. And you're like, yeah, you're 6. Let's learn some chords first, shall we? And so that was like a quick, 58-second thing. And I was just amazed. I logged it. It was like, I think yesterday. So in one day, it got 2,000 views. And I was like, So my question is, so we're all like, everybody's like, ooh, shorts are the next big hot thing. And based on that, I'm like, well, I need to do more of those. But here's the question that I was like, And this comes courtesy of Paul Culligan at paulculligan.com. If I release a bunch of shorts, how many shorts is too many shorts to the point where you go, it's like a trailer, right? If you watch a movie trailer, a lot of times you go to the movie and you're like, really, the best stuff was in the trailer. So can you have too many shorts to the point where people don't actually go watch your long form anymore?
Well, it's possible. I mean, short engagement is high on the numbers, low on actually anybody doing anything with it. You got to remember we're death scrolling as we're going through shorts. That's what people are doing. They're just watch, scroll, watch, scroll, watch, scroll, watch, scroll. And so it doesn't actually, the engagement on shorts is just not there. It's terribly deceptive because you look at those numbers and you get this adrenaline rush. You're like, I'm popular. No, everybody who does a short is popular, friends. Like they just get more numbers because we're doing more, we're getting more, we're viewing more. Well, but the numbers are showing the engagement is very, very low.
See, I haven't had the courage yet to click on my 58-second video to see if people made it all 58 seconds. You know what I mean? It's like that would be the part. Yeah. That would be oh, seriously? Like the average watch time is 36 seconds. I haven't looked at that yet, but I was just the numbers definitely made me kind of go, yeah. And then this is the thing. Chris over at castahead.net says shorts are a completely different medium. It's casting a tremendously wide net. Yeah, it's one of those things where, yes, everybody's mentioning my volume I hear. Number one, I bought a different mic arm that I'm not a big fan of. I think I'm going to, if you notice, I don't have the big arm coming up and down. I have a low arm going up. And I think the company is FIFIE something, FIFE something. And it's not bad. I had an Elgato once and then I sold it and now I'm wishing I had not. But everybody's saying my volume is too low, so I've turned myself up. So hopefully
they're insistent.
They're like, fix the volume now. How dare you? Yeah. So that's
yeah.
But and then Ken Blanchard said, I think it was the combo of the guitar where you have something not many people have. It's unique. Because unique is a superpower. That's true. It was different, and then it was even funny because I zoomed way out. And then the guitar still wasn't even in the video, really, not a whole lot. So, FIFINE, FIFINE, something. It's a weird. And the only
Did you buy it on Amazon or
I bought it on Amazon.
I
bought it on Amazon. And this, I'm pointing at the top clip that you actually clip the mic to. And what's weird is because I guess in Europe there's like a small screw and a big one. And we all want the big screw. And so you screwed it, which is like typical for me. Like I have a pod mic here. And I screwed it on, and it kind of like, it was one of those where you kind of go back and unscrew it and screw, because it didn't go all the way in. And I was like, okay, so it's fine. I literally go to do my first interview, and I go to move it, and literally it came off in my hand. So, and I was like, hold on. So I eventually ran, which it's on the floor, but I got one of those, ones you sit on the desk. So I don't think I love the fact that it hides it hides all the cables very nicely. It's just, I was like, I'm not sure what the deal is here. Let me do this real quick. So anybody watching.
What was the retail on that thing?
It's like $50, and the Elgato was 90. So I saved, a decent amount there. But here it's got little compartments that you can hide the cable in. So that's kind of nice. Oh, and it's working fine now. It is one of those where, I don't know where mine is, but you have to have an Allen wrench kind of handy because you tighten it, and then if I wanted to maybe move it up a little, it's like, oh, now I've tightened it too much. And then if you, it's like anything else. Yeah, see, and then it does this. So this is why I'm kind of not liking it.
Oh, that's not good.
I moved it up so it was in place, and then it just took a nosedive. And I don't know where my Allen wrench is right now. So here it is. I have my little Allen wrench.
What is failing? What part of that is failing where it's dropping?
Either I don't. Well, that's the problem is if I don't want it to, like now it's staying put, so that's kind of cool. But you have to have this. You tighten this up so that it stays in place. But what if? So it really is kind of you have to figure out where do you really want this microphone, because and Elgato is the same way. It just seems like you would tighten it up and it would stay tight even though you could still kind of move it. Where this, as soon as I move it, it's like I somehow loosen it and then it doesn't want to. Now it's staying in place, which is good. So it's just my first impression, and it could be really operator error, Dave. You just need to get a little more, experienced with your Allen wrench, but I was just like,
I'd go for the more expensive one.
Yeah,
I mean, I've used the Rode forever, and it just doesn't ever let you down. Now, I did have a Rode that I bought maybe 10 years ago, where the pivot points started. I don't know if they started to just rust or wear out, but I was getting a black dust out of them. And maybe they were tightened down a little bit too much. I don't know, but they would squeak a little bit when you would move, when you'd move the microphone. We replaced them with some inexpensive arms, $75 ones or such, that have worked great. But
yeah, Chris mentions here there are some low profile boom arms that are super expensive, but I use a few. And then the chat room moved my thing. There we go. But he uses the Elgato Wave in the Vivo Black Height Adjustable Pneumatic Spring Microphone Counterbalance Arm Mount. That's a mouthful there. I try to avoid anything with springs because when I had those, it always seemed like any time I moved them, it was gang in the background.
They'd screech. Yeah. They would screech, and then inevitably you hit it. You hit one, and they go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And boy, the chat room is going because I saw
they're fired up today.
Brad had a cool question, and I went to click on it, and I don't. Brad, ask your question again. I've been told it's not the podcast mic; it's the podcaster. But Brad, well, that's
there's a little bit of truth to that.
There is truth to that. Well, as I move the mic, I put back on my RE320 microphone. That's my favorite, or it was. And if you remember, that just had a very small windscreen that I had to, it was a third-party thing, and I was popping that thing like nobody's business. I turned down, because I remember you always said, hey, Dave, you sounded a little harsh on that. So I was backing down some of the, and it's turning out, I'm really liking the Rode Podmic USB. I'm like, they're all, like, I always kind of go, you do know there's this thing called treble and bass. You can kind of tweak them all. And, you can make any mic probably sound the way you like it. But, so I actually took it down. I was like, okay, this was my favorite mic. Because I want to start recording my audio version of my book. And when I did it, I did like 4 chapters. And I was like, oh, but that was on the RE320. And if I change mics, it's going to sound weird and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, So we might go back to the drawing board on that and just re-record the whole thing anyway. So I don't know what happened to that, but so that's what I'm using today. And, I'm sure I will get thousands of more views because my mic is coming from the bottom up and not the top down. And we all know that's really, he said sarcastically, what people do. But I would just going back to that thing about shorts, I was thinking about it because I rarely watch a Joe Rogan episode because I get most of the good stuff on YouTube. Howard Stern, I had a weird thing with Howard Stern where I would subscribe for like 6 months and then go through the extremely painful process of canceling your subscription on Sirius, because they will go through the script. Even if you go, hey, I've been through this before, I don't want to discount, I don't want to pause, I want to cancel, they will still go through the script. In fact, I think they got sued for that. Like, they made it really hard to leave. And I don't feel like I need to subscribe to Howard, because they put like 4 or 5 video clips that are all about 5 minutes long when they interview bands, to the point where you kind of go, do I really need to subscribe to get the 4 minutes that they didn't post on YouTube? So that was just my thought of yes, I want to do shorts, but on the other hand, I think a short, if you're using it like a trailer, should leave people wanting more. But that's kind of a weird thing, because if you don't deliver value, they're not going to share it. It's not going to, like, if somebody goes, hey, tune in this week and find out what's inside the box, like, that's not valuable. You might get some people to tune in and see what's inside the box, but I don't think that would, you need a full idea or a full thought, I would think. Don't you think, on shorts? Like, if you gave somebody just a giant click here to find out more. I hate those, by the way. There was a guy, because I don't know about you, but I don't do TikTok, not because I'm like, I just don't do TikTok. I'm like, because YouTube does this every time. If this is, I'm holding up a bag of microphones here, but every time I go to like avoid shorts, YouTube's just like, no, here. It's like think of like a really annoying Walmart greeter that wouldn't let you go into the store until you said hi. They're just like, no, wait, welcome, no, wait, stop. And
keep jumping in front of you, jump out of the aisle.
That's it. And so when I start to watch shorts, here's the rabbit hole again. And there was this guy, and it's great storytelling. Me and my friends jumped into this cave, and we went down, and they do this all the time. They're like little cave dwellers and blah, blah, blah. We didn't know what it was, and we heard this sound and blah, blah, blah. And then the thing that really drives me nuts, they'll be like, subscribe to find out what happened. And so the one I subscribed, I go to their channel, and this short is from who knows when, and there's no clear path to where do I find the answer to this. And that made me upset, to where I was like, all right, then F you, I'm unsubscribing, because you rode me. I just wasted 20 minutes watching all this stuff. And that's you want to deliver value. I think that would be bad. So,
well, I think shorts are best designed for brand awareness and brand building, and not necessarily. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if you're going to get a lot of engagement from a click here to do this. You're trying to just always be in the mind of whoever's watching it. So in your case, Dave, I mean, I think a lot of those, if you've got little snippets or stuff that you're bringing from your show that are funny or that are thought provoking or whatever, I think shorts are really good for that kind of interaction. And the brand building is hard to measure in a single episode, right? Or in a single short, or in a single device. And you can get tons of views and blah, blah. And you're getting tons of views because YouTube is favoring those, by the way. They want you to do that. They know listen, for them, shorts do the same thing for them as they do for you, which is just keeps people on YouTube, right? That's what they want. They want to be able to eventually deliver ads to you. So they want to keep you on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I think if you think of it that way, throw out some of your best stuff. Listen, it's never one thing, right? It just drives me nuts sometimes as we think, what's the one thing? It's never one thing. It's a whole bunch of things put together that makes things work for you. And shorts are just a part of the strategy of brand building and awareness on YouTube or wherever you decide to put them. If you like doing them, put them out there, make them. If you don't like it, don't.
That's such a great point, because one of the bands I was in was called the Sugar Daddies, and we wore like silk shiny shirts and ties. And it was a really bad idea, because those don't breathe well. You are a sweaty mess by the time the night is over. But we thought it was interesting, because there was somebody that actually ripped off our look. But it wasn't just our shiny shirts that made people come out. It was our music selection. And when we got off the stage, most bands go and hide in the back room and do whatever. we got off stage and went and talked to the audience to keep them there. Because the problem is when you stop playing music, a lot of people will be like, well, babysitter's probably tired. No, we went out and talked to them to keep them there so that once we started playing again, they'd get up and start dancing and they'd hang around. And if you go back to the days of the Beatles, everybody's like, oh, look at these guys with their long hair. So everybody grew their long hair because that's what it was. It was just their hair that made them so popular. No, it wasn't just one thing, the hair. It was the songwriting. It was, you can't reproduce that stuff. So, yeah, I totally get. I always kind of make a joke, but we are kind of looking for that 10,000 download switch, right? If I could just do that one thing, and then, oh, there it is, money from, manna from heaven. I'm like, maybe not. It's a matter of figuring out, again, who your audience is, and then going to where they are, and letting them know you have a show, and then asking them to share. But in some cases, like Gary Arndt is coming on the School of Podcasting because, are you ready for this, Jim? He got into, I wish I had my reverb set up.
Is it new and noteworthy?
New and noteworthy, which back in the day, right, was something that was almost an automated algorithm. If you remember, you only had eight weeks to be in new and noteworthy. It was this whole big to-do, and everybody thought it was a big deal. I'm in new and noteworthy, and it really wasn't a big deal. And now it kind of is because that's manually curated. So I asked him, I saw on Facebook that he's like, hey, I'm in new and noteworthy. And I'm like, dude, can you, he is kind of like a mad scientist where he's very strategic. Like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to measure if it worked or not. I'm going to do this. And I said, would you be willing to share, what happens when you go into new and noteworthy? He's like, oh, absolutely. So I'm looking forward to that interview. Chris over at castahead.net has some more insights. This is a guy who works in video a lot. He said, we've seen a handful of new subscribers from YouTube Shorts, but identifying the longer video in its froms. Yeah, so when you make a short, you can say, hey, point this at the longer video. Because I noticed that when I did that
nobody does it, though. Nobody does that.
No, because most of my shorts are just me spouting off something for 58 seconds.
Yeah, listen, people are watching those reels to get away from life. They're jumping in there and they are just scrolling one to the next. Now, listen, if you're going to create them, put the link in there every once in a while. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut. But if you're thinking they're going to drive massive engagement over, maybe every once in a while you'll hit it. So make sure the link is there. But it's really the death scroll, right? That's really what people are doing in those things.
Yeah, and then Gary says, I think YouTube is pushing shorts to get some competition with TikTok.
Oh, for sure. They have been.
Absolutely.
Guys, this isn't new. TikTok and YouTube, we've been doing this now for a while. And maybe it's the first time you've been hearing about it but it's kind of an old medium now, just to be honest. I mean, it's been out there for a couple years. We've been talking about doing shorts for a while. The hard part, Dave, I think, is getting it worked into your workflow. And it does take a lot of time to go and find what you want and kick it out. Some of the AI tools are better at this now. I always used my transcripts to back into them and get it done. And also, this form of media that we're using, this widescreen, it's not very good for reels.
Oh, no, it's not. That's where you pull it into. This is why, in this case, Ecamm is recording both of our videos, and I could go into Descript and squeeze and squish and make us tall and short and fat and put words over our faces and all the other fun stuff. So, yeah. And then Coach Dave says, why did the humans scroll through YouTube Shorts for hours and hours? Because they're on a quest to find the world's shortest
attention span. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think there's a weird, I think psychologically, or what's the term? It feeds that dopamine. For us, it feeds that dopamine fix as you're going through it. So these short little, there's a series of shorts of this guy who's seeing all these accidents happen on the workplace, big machinery sliding into other machinery.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And they do the event, the roof falls on a guy and then they go to the guy's face and he goes, or whatever. He makes a funny face and then they go to the next one. And there's a you're like, what's the value of that video?
Right.
What is the value? They're very popular. People love watching that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of it's a little bit of a dopamine hit for everybody going in for those. So if you have some interesting content, we experimented a little bit of this at Gallup with our content, and it was kind of like, I think there's some other ways we could be doing it better. And I think there's some content that's made for it better. But listen, on the scroll, this is why you get so many, because as soon as they hit it counts. Boom.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one, right? It's not like they went to it. It was just served to them. So that's why your numbers are so high. And then they may only watch it for 3 seconds before they scroll on. Do you scroll? I don't. I mean, well, then the feed begins to curate, and so obviously I watch shorts that are construction fails or people getting run over by a truck or whatever, right? Because then the reels start to consolidate based on your viewing preferences of the things you watch the longest.
It took me a long time to get YouTube to like, hey, I'm done with the shark stuff. I don't know what I watched, but it was just like, here's another shark. And I'm like, no, thank you. No, thank you. No, I saw it. I get it. They have big teeth and they're, but nobody dies, it's that whole 9 yards. Todd the Gator says, I've been using shorts and reels and TikTok for thought-provoking clips from my podcast, and it drives traffic to our Discord community and our website.
That may be a good way. Maybe a good way to get them to a community.
Yeah, they got to be good shorts. I think that's it. That's part of it. Yeah. Some other questions floating in here. Writing Fright says, I'm planning to use the Zoom PodTrack P4. I'll be doing a ton of location shows, but I've noticed that it's 16-bit. Is there that much difference between 16 and 24-bit? I'm using the Q2U mic. Here's what you can do. You can download my answer is I don't think so. I'm sure there is, but you got to remember, I don't have my earbuds with me, but there's a lot of people that are going to be listening through earbuds. And because in theory, if this was a painter, you're using more paint to capture, right? Or you're using a thicker lens to capture the image. There's more data, and more data means more accurate. Now, the question is, it's a human voice. It's not like it's a symphony. So if I was doing maybe a fictional pair, where a lot of soundscaping, maybe. But I was going to say, go find some software, record in 32-bit, and then switch it and record in 16-bit, and then vote with your ears. My answer is probably going to be not much of a difference. Like, I laugh. I'm a rebel. I export the file many times at -14, and it turns out that because, the standard's -16. Well, Dave, how dare you? It's this much different than -16. So that's one I honestly don't know. I know if you do video, a lot of people are like, ooh, can you get the audio in 32-bit? No, that's not 32-bit. I've got it confused. 48K, not 44.1. There's something with video that they want 48K. So depending on what you're doing, you may or may not need that. And then the Z-Man asks, is it still an advantage if you choose to just go audio on YouTube and other platforms until you feel comfortable? Well, here's the thing. Jim said it last week. If you don't do anything on YouTube, you get 0 views. If you do something on YouTube and you get 7 views, that's better. So if you're using something like Libsyn and there are other tools. Oh, speaking of that, man, was this the question this week? If you're using Libsyn to send your audio to YouTube as a video, you do not have to do a thing, because YouTube put out an official video and here's how you basically go into your YouTube channel and go up to the top and go add, and you'll see where there's an option that says add podcast. And so you grab your RSS feed. I need to do this week. I have a show on Buzzsprout. I have a show on Captivate and Blueberry. I need to go in and add these just to be part of the experiment here. And see what happens. But it's an advantage in the, one is 0 and one is more than 0. So yes, is it a big advantage in my travels? The School of Podcasting, Ask the Podcast Coach is available as a video and is a fake audio on my fake audio channel. and none of those get, we're talking 11, views. And again, I've never gone in to see how far people listen. That would be interesting. That might be, I'm doing some stuff this week on the School of Podcasting about a little bit about burnout, a little bit about handling trolls, and some other things. And just again, it's like Jim said, hey, you're all excited about 2,000 views. Realize that if somebody scrolled past that for a half a second, that's a view. And you're like, oh yeah, that is reality coming back to smack us in the face.
Yeah, but it's not a bad reality in the sense, I mean, every little bit of promotion can be good for you.
Yeah.
And it's just know what you're getting yourself into with that. Todd the Gator says the drawback to, he said earlier that that he's gotten a lot of engagement to his Discord group for it. Says the drawback, it attracts the wrong audience, usually a younger crowd. Not bad because it's younger. It's just, what are you trying to get? And sometimes you might attract a lot of noise to your group. I mean, we have for Home Gadget Geeks, we have a very well curated group of guys, and maybe a few ladies in there, who have been around for a long time, and they kind of understand the rules, and they know why they're there, and they know the conversation. And it's really, I don't even curate it anymore. It's a very well balanced, nice communication that we have with each other. It's a great group to be a part of, right? But we've been doing it together for like 12 years. If I open that up to the world, just go in any group that's big, that's fairly large. If I open that up to the world, all of a sudden that changes, right? And is that what I want? We talk about this all the time. I don't do Home Gadget Geeks for big numbers. I do it because it's a great community. And it's a great community because we've curated it to be so. And so the growth is very, very slow. Folks who come in, who understand what we're doing, who want to be a part of that group. So be careful. I've said this 1,000 times on this show. Be careful what you wish for in just opening up your, like, not all numbers are made the same. And you may attract an audience that actually may start driving people away from your show or away from your group, that rather than get to it. We've all been a part of Facebook groups where we've tapped out because it started with good intentions, but then after a while it's unbearable, and you're like, all right, I'm tapping out. Do you want them tapping out? I mean, you really want it. So just know, like, with audience engagement, and I love this idea of maybe having them land in a bigger Discord group or whatever, and then maybe the more engaged ones move into something else. But just know the audience you're going to attract in those kinds of situations, and then know how to work with them. This is, Dave, I think for a lot of podcasters, this is the hardest part. They don't know how to deal with what they get, and then they say something, or they do something, or they make a public statement of some kind, or they get frustrated, or they get they're frustrated with their audience. This is and some of the groups I get asking the same questions all the time. You know why? Because new people are coming in all the time. Then the folks who've been around a while, they get sick of the new people asking the same questions all the time. Then they start fighting, right? So just be careful what you wish for. Make sure you have a good plan for your funnel. Like, if you're going to create, a TikTok or a Instagram or a Reel is top of the funnel activity. Make sure you have a plan to bring them from the top of the funnel to wherever you're trying to lead them. And then you have some way of curating it so that the unwashed masses, so to speak, don't necessarily commingle all the time with your most engaged audience. Because the most engaged, they expect a little bit, they expect, I think, a little bit more of a curated, kind, gentler experience. They don't want to be they don't want to be out there with, and I'm speaking in generalities here. But just make sure you understand your marketing funnel at that point, that you know where they're going, you have a plan for them. This is where most of us make the mistake, is we don't think about the full marketing funnel process. What are we going to do with them once we have them? And we're just so desperate to get 10,000 views in a video.
I'd rather have 1,000 of the right people than 10,000 where 9,000 of them are just trolls and that whole 9 yards. I did scroll over and logged into my website, And down here, this is using pretty links in WordPress. And you'll see this one at the bottom. I've had 5,000-ish people click on, because I have schoolofpodcasting.com/YouTube, and I put that in my YouTube, like today on Ask the Podcast Coach. It'll be like, join the School of Podcasting, go to schoolofpodcasting.com/YouTube. So that's interesting. I'll have to go and see how many times the coupon code YouTube has been used, because I'm thinking off the top of my head, not a ton, which either means my landing page is crap, or people are just looking for free stuff. You never know. We have a ton of questions coming in here. You ready to say we're not lawyers, Jim?
Yes, we're not lawyers.
We're
I
not
didn't even
lawyers.
stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
But what is media omission insurance? Do you know the answer to this one?
I don't.
Well, we've got the answer already. Where did Brad put an answer in here? It's basically because Brad does a show about like extermination, and said Gordon FIREMARK, which is a name we're going to be saying a lot here, the podcast lawyer, stated that if I make any errors of omission in my pest control podcast, I could get sued. So he suggested media errors and omissions insurance. So it's one of those things, if somebody sues you because of your podcast, that can basically, potentially cover your butt. Again, I'm not a lawyer. You would want to talk to Gordon FIREMARK. And then Monty says, well, wouldn't forming an LLC also protect you or personal assets? In theory, yes. Here's my whole thought on this. Not to change the subject, but it is kind of, so I would ask Gordon, would be my first answer to that. Do you have any other insights before I kind of take this topic a little different?
Yeah, no, keep going. You're fine.
Okay. So I've brought up this question because we're all worried about being brand safe, right? Because you're ready. If I say booger, oh my gosh, we might get, somebody's going to cancel us. And so
I think booger's pretty safe.
If we said, see, now we've said it twice. We're done. But here's my thing. If we started off every show and I said, hey, welcome to you get your podcast questions answered live. Keep in mind, the views and express opinions of the host do not necessarily reflect those of their sponsors. All right, who's our first question, Jim? Wouldn't that just clear everyone of the whole brand safe? So if they said, hey, they said booger 3 times on that show, I'm going to go tell Mark over at podcastbranding.co he shouldn't be sponsoring such filth. Mark could go, well, didn't you hear him say that? That's not. I wouldn't say booger. I'm Mark. I'm in Canada. We don't say booger. We say nose dropping because we're polite, right? So I just kind of, because there's literally an industry being built to stalk podcasters to see what they're doing on their show, what they're wearing, what they're doing off their show, just to make sure we're brand safe. And the old hippie in me just wants to wave certain fingers at the man and go, no, thank you. And I want to ask somebody. In fact, I'll probably ask somebody if Tom Webster or Brian Barletta or somebody from Sounds Profitable who is up to their neck in ads, say, why wouldn't that cover people? Because, I'm thinking that sounds too simple, and it would put people out of work who are, busy getting paid stalking podcasters. But I'm like, if you had sponsors, it sounds like a blanket. They do it on the radio. There'd be like, when it's the Dr. Mike show on Sunday at 9:30, the following is a paid endorsement from Dr. Mike, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, so you just put
that doesn't guarantee they can't take you to court, right? I mean, or they can't sue you. It's much like fair use. It's something you use in defense when you are in court. So I think sometimes some of this, and I think you could do it, and Gordon would know more, but you can do it one of two ways. You can purchase the insurance, which is going to get you a lawyer, right? Or you can just keep a retainer on a lawyer who's going to give you this advice on some things you should do. And then if you do get served, you've got someone who already knows what you're doing, and they can then file back, a whatever they do, whatever those things are. And maybe it gets stopped before it even makes its way into the courtroom. You're still going to pay.
Yeah.
Listen, you're going to talk publicly like we do. You have to know. You're opening yourself up for this. Like you're asking. I don't want to say you're asking for it, but you kind of are in some ways. You and I do this willingly, and all podcasters going in knowing the things we say we're going to be held accountable for.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, and there's no way around that. If you're going to be public in any form, whether you're typing it, writing it, putting it in a book, writing in a newspaper, or making a podcast or whatever on YouTube, you're accountable, and it's going to open yourself up for that. So just know you just can't, you can't just start whacking away and say, I'm not accountable for these kinds of things.
Yeah, Gordon, if you have pants on and stuff, ask the podcastcoach.com/question, because he's like Beetlejuice. We've said Gordon FIREMARK 3 times now. We're talking about omission insurance and that whole 9 yards. But if you feel like coming on video,
that's awesome.
That would be fun. But it's because it really is one of those things where.
But you don't have to, Gordon. You don't have to. You don't have to come on.
Because I realize he's in California. It's early.
And he charges for this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
This is his business. So, Gordon, if folks have questions, they can get to you. If you want to come on, you're welcome to.
Yeah, firemark.com. Because Ralph says I have that at the end of his show. Because, again, he's advising people on their finances. I do that anytime I mention anything. When I did the Logical Weight Loss show, I'd be like, well, if you do this and your heart rate is this and this and that, and I'm like, and as always, consult your personal doctor before doing any exercise. I always had to throw that in there. And Brad is saying, if you create a business in Virginia servicing, selling, and recommending pesticides, you have to have a pesticide business insurance. So Gordon said for YouTube, podcasting or blogging, you need to have some sort of, if you want to be safe. Not that we want to scare everybody out of starting a podcast, but it gets a little, you can.
Well, anytime you're giving an opinion, anytime you're making a judgment call, I mean, you're opening yourself up for those kinds of the criticisms or the legal action that may take place in that. And I think we all know that. I mean, I think we all know deep down inside, we're like, oh yeah, we're held accountable for the things that we say. And you can say free speech, but that doesn't really, that's the different, I guess it's a different thing.
Well, that's where there's also free consequences. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
I've known people that, there was a guy that went into, like, you're allowed to be an atheist. It's a free country. And he viewed his he was like atheist plus and was really just bashing everything. And, his job hurt it. Now, he never mentioned his job, but the job kind of went, do we really want this guy on the team? And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying the dude got canned because of stuff he said on his podcast. So you do have to kind of keep that in mind.
Listen, I spend a lot of time thinking about the other podcasts that I do, including this one, about things that are said here that may reflect poorly about me for the Gallup stuff, because this one doesn't pay, that one does.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, I need to be very, very cautious, and I am. And there's been some moments where I went, I probably shouldn't have said it that way.
Yeah.
And it happens, right? You have those things happen, but for me, it is about when I'm on other podcasts, of being careful. And if I'm not careful, maybe getting it deleted. If I made it, well, we all make mistakes, right? And that's happened before. Where I've had to have it deleted.
Yeah.
And you just to be cautious. And I think this seems a little elementary, and I think you guys are all aware of this, but you're just be careful. Like think critically about it before you say it.
Yeah, you can. I did a YouTube video. I said the internet writes in ink,
Yeah.
And
you also, Dave, full transparency, said, and I won't give the details, but you basically, called out a company and said a word they were not pleased with, and they contacted you and said, you can't say that.
Yeah. Well,
right?
It was funny because, again, I went to Gordon FIREMARK at firemark.com. I said, hey, like, these guys are saying they're going to release the hounds. And he's like, what'd you say? And I was like, this, that, and that. And he went, yeah, you can't say that. And so
you should back that out.
Yeah, you should probably back that out. So speaking of that, the one and the only, we've now I have to drag this off the screen. This is where Dave should edit his YouTube stuff, but he doesn't. So I got to go back to this screen so I can drag this over here, and now I can go to this screen and drag the one and only Gordon FIREMARK, who got up early. He's early and he's still there we go. And there's Gordon, the one and only.
Hey guys.
Hey, Gordon.
So thanks for popping in. I know it's
Sure
early
thing.
there.
I'm still putting in my ears.
But we had somebody ask about omission insurance, and they had already talked to you, and so.
Oh yeah.
So should we all have omission insurance because we might say something stupid?
Well, look, in a perfect world, anybody who's creating content would have some insurance for the errors and omissions that can come up in this world. It's not a perfect world, and in fact, it's really, really hard to find this kind of insurance. There just aren't a lot of carriers writing these policies, and when they do, expensive.
Yeah. Can we throw another, like, hey, let's get free legal advice?
You get what you pay for, but
and can I also say there's only one thing cooler than Gordon FIREMARK's voice, and that's Gordon FIREMARK's voice in the morning. He's got extra. There's extra Gordonish to
little
it.
extra.
I had somebody ask me at the School of Podcasting, and I always just say, go talk to Gordon, and as always, it depends. But they were talking about if I read a book and they want to talk about it, they're like, can I get into problems? And I'm like, well, how long's the book, right? Because if it's 4 pages and you give away 2 pages, you just gave away 50% of the book. And I know it depends, but are there any things that people might not know that they should think about in that?
Well, copying is actually the issue. If you read a book and you like what it teaches and what you learned from it, and you want to repackage that in your way and make it yours, that's okay. What you learn from a history book is yours to use as you please. When you read from the book, you are making a direct copy, and that's not okay. But so that's the broad strokes. Now, if you copy the outline of the book but then say everything in your own way, it's a gray area. You're probably crossing a line there. But you definitely don't read from the book and make it your own. Tell things in your own way, because the ideas that are embodied in a work of copyright are not protected. It's only the actual expression of the ideas themselves that is what's protected. So
yeah. And in my case, we were talking about this earlier, where I called the one company. I said, they're a bunch of liars and nobody should ever buy from this company. And Gordon's like, yeah, you can't really say that. But I could say when I ordered this product, they said it was only this and then this, so I can do a recant, which I did, and they still said, yeah, we're still going to sue you. And I was like, all right, I'll take the whole thing down. It was
well, and
yeah,
that's leverage is what that is.
Yeah.
Well, you'd already said it too. Like,
Yeah.
you'd already fired, you'd already, and they know the intent behind that, and they really don't want you because you're on their radar now. They're gonna say, yeah, we would appreciate it if you just wouldn't do anything, because that'll get you to leave the negative review alone. I think a lot of folks too, I see this on the work side of things. As soon as they ask us, then we have to address it. Like, it's one of those I'm not saying you should do it and not ask for permission, but just realize as soon as you ask someone, and if they say take it down, you need to take it down at that point, or you need to do whatever based on the copyright holder. And so I always tell people all the time, I'm like, they're like, hey, I want to ask you a question about something I've done. And I'm like, do you really want to? I'm just saying, because as soon as I know, I have to do something about it. I cannot, it's my responsibility as part of the brand, as part of protecting the brand and IP and what we do. As soon as I know, I got to say something, and I would be held liable if they knew from an organizational standpoint, if they knew I knew and I didn't do anything about it, I would be like,
There's the job.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it goes both ways. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't, Gordon, and respond to this. I'm not saying you shouldn't ask for permission, because, right. But what is you think about
an answer.
Yeah. Your advice for podcasters is they're thinking about covering IP and somebody's IP of some kind. Is there good advice that you have on how to approach that? What's the smartest way to approach that in covering it?
Well, look, the only conservative legal answer, because there's people's jobs
Yeah,
on the
right
line
on.
again,
Right, right
is
on.
always get permission. If you don't get permission, don't use it. There are exceptions and there are defenses to infringement cases, and fair use is the one that everybody knows the name of, and very few people actually understand, and that includes judges and lawyers. So, it's always a little bit of a judgment call. If what you're doing is newsy, if what you're doing is criticism commentary, like a movie review show or something like that, you're more likely going to fall in that fair use category than if you're just grabbing a piece of music or a clip of something just as an interstitial bumper between scenes of your thing. And that's not going to be as likely to be fair use. If what you're doing is substituting for the purchase of the thing or the experience of listening, then it's going to be infringement, and you just can't do that. So
Very cool.
Daniel's asking a question about generative AI.
Yeah.
As far as we know the New York Times and Microsoft and OpenAI are in conversations today about what can be used and what can't be used in generative AI from content. Any thoughts on that, Gordon? Just
my thoughts
from
are
what you
we are
see?
in for a bumpy few years ahead as this gets decided. We've seen a few lawsuits already being dismissed because they just didn't state things in a way that made legal sense for claims. But the New York Times case against Microsoft and OpenAI seems to have been a more carefully thought out claim, and the evidence seems to be that the output is what's infringing. I think that it's the input is where the copying happened, and there are some nuances in copyright law that allow for these ephemeral recordings of loading something into a computer's memory so it can do the job it's supposed to do. And so the question is, are we paying attention to the inputs or the outputs or both or the combination? And we just don't know yet. I think New York Times has a pretty strong case, and we know they've got pretty strong legal teams. So hopefully OpenAI and Microsoft have similarly strong legal teams, and it'll be a robustly debated and litigated issue. So we'll find out an answer.
Well, it'll be helpful because it'll give us some clarity, right, going forward. And it won't be the last case, right? All these cases build a legal precedent, which allow us then to have clarity on what we can and can't do in the future, or what we should. It's really not can and can't do. What we should and shouldn't do in the future, right? Because there's some gray lines.
Well, I mean, in the image generating AI tool area, it's very clear. If you tell the system, hey, give me a picture of Spider-Man wearing a Darth Vader helmet, you're going to get an image that looks like Spider-Man wearing a Darth Vader helmet. That is a copy of both the Darth Vader helmet design and the Spider-Man character design. And so, don't in that scenario. When it comes to the words, and you ask it, give me a summary of XYZ topic or write a script about such and such, unless it's very obviously copied. As users, I don't think we need to be too worried about that end of it yet.
Yeah, and then Uncle Marv is asking, doesn't it usually come down to damages if you're harming a person or a business reputation or causing some sort of loss?
Well, yeah, there's a long, it has to be worth suing for somebody to come after you. That said, sometimes stopping you from what you're doing is the real result thereafter, and that's an injunction. It's not about a money award. But I'll tell you, in the New York Times case, they have a copyright registration for every article that ever appears in the newspaper. And when you have a copyright registration that's made in a timely fashion, you don't have to prove actual money damages. You can go into court and say, Your Honor, this is a terrible thing. Look what they've done. Give us the statutory damages. And the range of statutory damages is from $750 to $150,000 for each infringement. And if you look at the millions of articles that New York Times has had infringed, you're already talking about billions of dollars in damages.
Note to self, do not quote New York Times. Like, holy cow, that's wild. I know everybody's talking in the chat room. Mickey Mouse is now fair game. He's in a Steamboat Willie version of Mickey Mouse. I'm sure Disney
is
Oh.
I was going to
as-
say, don't expect Disney to sit on their hands about this. They're coming after you if you do anything that even crosses the slightest little line.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Disney
Well-
and Coke have very big legal teams that are not going to let you infringe upon there. And in the Disney space too, they own so much now. You just mentioned Spider-Man and Darth Vader, and
No, yeah.
certainly I think Spider-Man's Sony, but Darth Vader would. So you get both in that.
Right.
Gordon, do caricatures fall under that same? If I have AI create a caricature of Spider-Man and Darth Vader, and it's cartoonish and not an exact copy of what they look like, is that any different? And I know you're not giving legal advice, and I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
But
I'm a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. That's the disclaimer. That's an interesting one because you premise the question on a caricature of a character. And in that instance, it's still based on the character. So it's a copy. Now, if it is truly a parody and it's making fun of the original, then we may be back into that fair use arena where parody is a protected form of free speech. However, when you talk about a caricature of a real person, they don't own, as long as it's used for non-commercial purposes, not an advertisement, that you don't own a likeness right that's equivalent to copyright. And so the caricature is probably fair game in that arena. Just don't use it in those ads.
Is that different? The NCAA now has NIL, name, image, likeness, that these players actually do have a protection or can be paid for the use of their likeness. Is that new?
That's where commercial use comes into play. They can be paid for commercial uses of their likeness. But if I'm running a newspaper and I want to show a picture of, the star athlete from my local college, I'm allowed to do that without any permission from them. Yeah.
And
So
you have time for one more question, or Dave? Did you?
I got all day. It's early here.
Our let me ask this before Dave does. I'm gonna sneak it in. Does LLCs? Okay, good. We're thinking the same thing. Is it really worth for a podcaster to do an LLC in some cases? And I know, again, blanket statement, very general, but what kind of advice would you give there?
LLC, the limited liability in an LLC is only one of the good reasons to form an LLC. I think it is a good reason. It's an extra wall of, a wall around the moat to protect you from potential liability. It makes it a little harder for people to come and get you. If you are the person who says the thing on the podcast that hurts somebody's reputation, they're still naming you individually in the lawsuit. But other good reasons for forming an LLC are it's a good way to set up the organizational structure of who owns this thing. If it's multiple people who are creating, it stands in what I call the podcast prenup. It becomes the document that allocates who owns what and who is responsible for what and what happens if we break up and those kinds of who gets the house and kids, those kinds of things. So it's another good reason for doing it. It's also just I think the formality lends itself to a kind of professionalism that carries through into the quality of the work that's output. And if the cost benefit analysis works in your favor, great. Some places it's very expensive to have an LLC. Here in California, it's about $1,000 a year by the time you finish with taxes and everything, and that may not be worth it. But in some states, it may be $15 a year. So it's a analysis you have to do.
That's it. Well, it's time to play. Let's start the music, or not.
We
have music for this.
Okay.
It's time to play Pimp Your Stuff. And so, first of all, if you want more from Gordon, you can check out his book, The Podcast Blog and New Media Producer's Legal Survivor Guide. And if you need more than that, well, then you go over to FIREMARK.com where you can find all things Gordon. Is that the best website, Gordon, for everybody to find?
That's the law firm website, but I've got a lot of stuff available on GordonFiremark.com.
Oh, there we go. Because he mentioned, he mentioned the podcast prenup. Well, you can get one of those over at podcastprenup.com. And if you need a what you call it, the thing where the guest and the people,
the guest release,
podcastguestrelease.com, I believe.
Just podcastrelease.com.
Podcastrelease.com. Have we missed anything?
No, God, I'm so glad I woke up early this morning.
Yeah. Were your ears burning and you're like, why is this? Is people talking about me?
I was sitting on my iPad and I was watching something and I was scrolling, what am I going to watch next? And there I saw you guys were doing your thing live,
Oh man.
and I must have heard something in my
Yeah.
was
Well,
mine.
Did you ever think you'd be the podcast legal guy when you started? Like everybody, you got to talk to Gordon. You got to talk to Gordon.
I
You got to
did.
talk to Gordon about everything. So, did you ever? Were you
My
gonna do that
nefarious
at some point?
plan is working. When I started practice, there wasn't podcasting, and I was going to be a movie studio lawyer, and I found this niche. I love this community. I love podcasting myself, as you know. So it just feels right to serve this community and help folks get their message out and do it safely.
And we'll see you at Podfest.
I'll be there. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Always fun to see you. Thank you so much, man. Anything else
Thanks for
before
having me
Jim?
on.
Before I escort-
Gordon, just send Dave the bill for this time that you've been on.
Alrighty, he'll pay up in Orlando next week.
He'll pay. Checks in the mail.
All right. Thank you, my man.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Gordon. Thanks for jumping in. You bet.
That was fun. It's one of the things I love about this show. It's like, I'm happy that I've now got things set up so if somebody comes in, I just have to figure out how to add them. That's the advantage of this Elgato teleprompter that I have is that I'm now looking at you when I'm talking on video. The bad news is it's 9 inches, and when I'm like trying to get to the little button that's now, 1/4 of a centimeter, I'm like, yeah, I can't see that. So it's always kind of fun with that. But yeah, Gordon's a good guy.
They need a big screen teleprompter. Like, why do all teleprompters have to be this big? Why can't they be 24-inch teleprompters? Hey, Elgato, make a bigger teleprompter.
My guess is that that's coming. I think they started off with something less expensive to see if there was a market for this. But I know I've ended up with TV sets. I remember I went on Black Friday in a Best Buy. I was like, I'm just going to get like 32-inch. And then it's like, oh, wait, 48's only another $32. And then you go, so you sell yourself on the 48. Wait, 72's only another. And the next thing you know, you walk out with a TV the size of your house. And then you have to go buy a new stand because the old stand is too small. That was a great time. So
we just need translucent, I'm not sure that's the right word, translucent monitors that are glass panels to begin with, and they shine up the picture. And then you could put the camera behind it and then just tell the screen to cut out a little piece where the camera's going through so it wouldn't be affected by the light.
Well, there is the Plex.
How expensive could that be?
There is the Plexi.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I've seen those.
I was very happy to see that PlexiCam, he said, as he puts the, I don't have a quick thing yet for it, but PlexiCam has an affiliate program, so that'll be in the show notes.
I'll be honest, I think we'll have better luck with the computer keeping our eyes looking at the camera than we will. Because I don't have a lot of discipline to look in the same spot when I'm talking. I don't, even if it was there, I'm not staring at you the whole time. That's why people are like, you should get a teleprompter. I'm like, even if I had one, I wouldn't use it. I wouldn't, because I look all over the place when I'm talking. So for me, none of those things. If I really wanted to keep my eyes on the camera, I think I'm going to need software to kind of hold my head straight, because I think it's coming. Like, I think we're getting closer to it, where
they're
it holds my head straight and I just stare.
Yeah, they say in the chat room, the bigger the teleprompter, then your eye has to move farther.
True. Yeah, that's true.
And I get that. But I know for me, I'm sitting here looking, but I'm also, you're probably seeing if you're watching the video, I'm also watching the chat room. So I'm kind of all over the place. But wow, it is 11:34. That means it's time to thank our awesome supporters. Did you need another coffee pour before?
Oh, I can do, certainly I can.
If I can find, yeah, here we go. Because Jim's thirsty. There we go. And so we always take this time to thank our awesome supporters. And of course, which means when I think about it, we should go back here and thank Ralph again, being the new awesome supporter. Find him over at AskRalphPodcast.com. And the other people we want to thank and remind you of are... Did I mention the whole 9-inch thing sometimes can be a pain in the butt? There we go. There's a joke there somewhere. Courses, coaching, and community. Where is that? Well, it's at the School of Podcasting, which is where I hang out, and you can have great fun there. And the community now, because we just had a ton of people just sign up, and I'm having an absolute blast over there, and so is everybody else. But check it out. If you use the coupon code COACH, you can save on either a monthly or yearly subscription. And Ask the Podcast Coach runs on Podpage, and you can try Podpage at trypodpage.com. And in full disclosure, that is also an affiliate link, but I love Podpage. I have my sites, like I said, Ask the Podcast Coach runs on Podpage, and we're using Ecamm right now to stream the show. So if you want to check that out, supportthishow.com/Ecamm. And if you need more Jim Collison, and hey, who doesn't? Look at him. Can you not just you got to have more Jim Collison? Well, then, that's the wrong button. Then you got to go over to theaverageguy.tv and check out Home Gadget Geeks. And now it's time for, of course, the thing that we're all waiting for. The supporter of the week is, of course, Ralph.
Yes.
But we also, because Ralph is a $20 supporter, he is also on the Wheel of, I do need some reverb for this, Wheel of Names. So we will, first we will shuffle them just to make sure it's even and fair. And now I will spin the Wheel of Names, and round it goes. And this week's awesome supporter is Craig from Live Well in Flourish. Yes, congratulations, Craig. And if you haven't listened to a show, they're really short. And it's, I always say, if you can make me laugh, cry, think, grow, and educate or entertain. And Craig always makes me think. And here's you ready for something crazy, Jim? Craig is not trying to make any money with his podcast.
What?
He's literally he just wants people to live well and flourish. And I was like, because I asked him once, he's like, nah, it's not really the motivation of this. So it's a really cool show, livewelandflourish.com. And you can be an awesome supporter. You can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And if you're like, I'm not really into a monthly thing, and then go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/support. And there are other ways to support the show. So you can say, hey, thanks for getting that Gordon guy to come on and answer a bunch of legal stuff. Or, hey, I'm a podcast consultant and you're helping me with my business, and you just want to say thanks, then you can do that. So the next question we have here is, this was an interesting one. And we've kind of hit this topic before, but it's worth hitting again. And that is, this person says, hey, long story short, I'm a former law enforcement officer that I think has a good story to tell on the life of a law enforcement officer. I would agree with that. That's behind the scenes stuff. The truth behind the career and just general stories from when I was a cop. P.W. Fenton was an ex-cop. He is there's a guy that should be in the Hall of Fame. I can't remember the name of his show, but he had amazing stories. And so he says, my career came to an abrupt end after a traffic incident. My question is, would my story be a good potential podcast or more of an audio book? I guess it comes back to, of course, Jim, everybody's favorite word.
It depends.
It does depend. What do you want to do with this story? I'm looking to record it on my own and potentially have someone edit it or promote it. I'm open for thoughts. I would like to remain as anonymous as possible. That can be tricky in the entire process. However, you can just come up with a name. Your name is, Bert, Schmorgenstern or something. However, I don't think that will last long. Just like to keep myself and former employees anonymous as possible. Any suggestions? Well, yeah, that's tricky. But any suggestions? I don't think I have enough time to produce it myself. However, I spend significant long periods in a vehicle by myself where I could potentially record while driving. And that's when you hit that to me is when you're like, yeah, that's not, please don't record podcasts while you're driving, especially from a cop. There's a part of me that goes, you do realize that is the essence of distracted driving. I was like, that's bad. But I like the idea of a cop, sharing the behind the scenes. And I guess if you don't want I'll just use Akron because that's where I'm from, Akron, Ohio. So if I'm an ex-cop from Akron, Ohio, I just don't say I'm from Akron, Ohio. I could say I was a police officer for 12 years in a smallish town in the Midwest, East Coast. Well, does it matter where you're from? I guess that whole 9 yards. And then the hard part of being anonymous is, what if the book takes off and now people want to do video of you? I had a guy at Libsyn, as you might imagine, really, really upset. He's an undercover cop. And so they kept his identity. They didn't use his name or anything because it was an audio podcast. And then they put his picture in the show notes. And he's like, "Are you guys trying to get me killed? Like, pull that down." And it wasn't a Libsyn thing. It was the podcast. But they emailed us, to which I emailed Rob, and he was like, "Yeah, take that down." So anonymous can be tricky. But the other question, should this be a podcast or an audio book? I know there is Scott Sigler, who is another Hall of Fame podcaster, and he used to put out his entire book as a podcast and then say, if you liked this story, please go buy the book on Amazon or donate or something of that nature. So it really depends on what do you want to do with the story. If you put it out as an audiobook, and then if you're going to put it out as an audiobook, recording it in the car, now you got to remember, and again, you don't have to have a $5,000 kind of studio, but recording in the car, the only time I recommend that is if you have a house with 6 kids and thin walls, sometimes recording in the garage in your car can be a quietest place you can find, but please don't record a podcast while you're driving. If that's the case, if you're like, I don't have enough time, I strongly urge you to download Toggle. It's TOGGL.com. It's a free timer, and just every hour stop and put in what you were doing. And I'm pretty sure you're going to find out you're spending a lot more time watching Seinfeld reruns than you actually do have time.
People still do that?
They do. It's awesome. It's a show about nothing.
Seinfeld's popular. There's some studies too. We say hands-free driving, talking to somebody on the phone, but there's some studies that have shown that talking that way as you're imagining because your brain is imagining the other person as you're talking to them, that you are just as impaired as when you are drunk driving. So like be careful. A lot of people, I was hands-free, and you're like, well, if you're hands-free and you're talking to another person, that could be just as dangerous.
Well,
so be careful. I love your idea though, in the garage or in the driveway. If it's cold and you can turn the car on, but try not to, because listen, you have to be thinking when you're podcasting. You got to be really thinking about what you're talking about. Have you ever taken that trip, Dave, where you've been driving and you all of a sudden you were distracted doing something, and you get to the destination, and you're like, I don't remember any of the exits.
Yeah.
Like, well, guess what? You're distracted, and that's not great. So just be careful. Yeah, just be careful.
Yeah, it's tricky. Another fun-filled question here, and this will also tie into Ralph from the AskRalphPodcast.com. This isn't Ralph asking this, but he just went through this. I'm setting up a new Apple Podcast Connect account for a new corporate podcast. Whenever I log in to get the podcast listed, I get you need to finish activating your ID page. I've added details. Oh, it's interesting because it says, and a payment method, because that's the problem. Like 99% of the time, you haven't added a credit card to the account, which is dumb because it doesn't cost you anything to list your show. So my guess would be it's your payment problem. But the other thing that's cool is Ralph just went through this. He had somebody before he came to the School of Podcasting set up his show, and that person set up his show in Apple Podcasts. So Ralph didn't have access to all those extra fun little stats that you can get. And so this person moved to who knows where, but basically he lost contact with this person. So he's kind of like, so how do I get my show? And the knee-jerk reaction is, I don't have any access to that. I'll just resubmit. Well, now you make a duplicate of your show on Apple, and all the reviews and ratings and all that stuff is on the other show. So I said, reach out to Apple and give them, here's the link to my show on Apple, here's my RSS feed, and say, I want to move this under my Apple ID. So Ralph went over and set up his own Apple ID, super easy, and send all that information to Apple. Apple then emails you back. And what was cool is the last time I walked somebody through this, it was like a day and a half for Apple to respond. They were responding within hours. So he had this whole process done in a day, basically. And he emailed them. They said, here's a bunch of numbers, and you have to put it in there are a number of fields, but the easiest one is your copyright field. So he logged into Libsyn, and because he had access to his account. So again, if you're having somebody else do your podcast, don't let them set up your hosting, because then you don't own your show. So Ralph logged in, put the thing in the copyright, hit save, went back to Apple and said, hey, I did the thing. And they go over and look. And the only person that can put that kind of code in the feed is the owner of the show. So at that point, you verified that you are the owner of the podcast, and they moved it from whoever the other person was into Ralph's account. So now he can go in, because he's doing a daily show. And he's one of the things I always preach is go look at your completion rate. It's kind of soul crushing, but sometimes we got to take the hard lumps to keep going. So yeah, just be careful. Like at Gallup, Jim, if you, heaven forbid, get hit by a bus, like, do they know like your login and password for all the podcast stuff?
Yeah,
we have
we have that all set up. Yeah, just in case. There's folks who have admin. We have double admins for everything, and some of those we actually have set up a SharePoint site that's got every single site we use has all the various folks who have login information. And of course, we don't put the passwords in there because that would be that wouldn't be the right thing to do. But we have multiple people who have access to it, and so yeah, we set it up in a way that if something were to happen to me, I like to say call in Rich. If I called in Rich one day and said, you know what, today's my last day, I'm out of here, they'd have a backup plan for sure.
Yeah, because I had this happen this week at Libsyn, where the person that did the podcast has moved on. And so as you would imagine, the IT department goes and shuts down that email so they don't have access. Well, the problem is when the new person goes to log in, they don't know what his password is, so they have it resend to the email on file, which was just shut down by the IT department. So that's why you should have your IT department know what the password is, have a backup, so that, in the event you leave or get fired or whatever, it's icky. And that one got sticky because they knew the email and a couple other things, but they didn't know the last four on the credit card. So we had to go through a little more of a hokey pokey, and they were not happy about that. And one of the things you have to realize why you have to verify your account, and I've mentioned this before, but there are teams of people that start podcasts and things do not go well, and people do really stupid. It's like, what did you call it, Jim, earlier when I was telling Jim about this, the 1970s divorce or something like that?
Yeah, it's like a 1970s divorce.
Yeah, where they're like, I'm going to take the chainsaw and cut the car in half. It's like
burning the house down and putting toxic chemicals on the lawn and whatever.
Yeah. So that's the thing. If you wonder why and I'm pretty sure all media hosts would do this, we have to verify you are the owner, because it might just be that, upset team member that wants to go in. Oh, that's fine. I'm going to delete all the files then. You're like, wait, what? So yeah, it's kind of icky. Don't do that. Another quick one here, talking about recording levels. My podcast volume output is low. How can I fix it on Audacity post uploading it? Well, once you've uploaded it, you've got to re-upload it, because the thing that's out in the world is not working good. What volume settings should I record in? Also, how long should my intro be? It's 3 minutes now. Any advice is appreciated. So one of the things I've seen people do, and I always joke about this, but I'm sure if I actually got my hearing tested, they'd be like, dude, you've lost an amount of this and that. So my headphones are always cranked up. So consequently, I don't have to turn my mic up very loud for me to be loud in my headphones. Probably why I wasn't loud enough this morning. And so it may sound great in your headphones, but you've got, your recording level is a 2, but your headphone level is a 27. So it sounds perfectly fine in your headphones, where you want to be, you're recording at a 10 and your headphones are at about an 8. And so that's something to keep. And I aim for -6 to -12. That gives me a little bit of head room. So if I get excited about something, I'm not peaking, and that's what you should look for in Audacity, or if you're using Audacity, just don't go into the red. Like occasionally hit the yellow, kind of be in the yellow a fair amount, but don't go into the red. Jim, what's your 3 minutes is a bit long for an intro. Well,
Yeah, I'd say that's the longest I would advise. If it gets too much longer, you can, you run some risks. I mean, if it's interesting, if it's a funny intro,
right,
it could probably go a little bit longer if it's interesting, if you mix it up a little bit. Yeah, but I wouldn't go too much longer than 3 minutes. That's a good. 2 is good. 1 is even better. If you can get if you can get. So listen, we're we're also afraid of missing those ads in the beginning. Like they got to hear it right up front. They got to know or whatever. And I think sometimes the longer your podcast is around, this may not be great advice, but the longer your podcast is around, the less of an intro it actually needs. Now, you're picking up new people all the time. This is the hard part. You got folks that listen all the time, and you got new folks coming in, and you want to make sure those new folks have a great experience and they understand why they're there. Chances are, though, I think, Dave, once they've clicked on it, they've given permission, like they think this is going to be interesting. You probably don't need to explain, the whole theory to them of why you started the podcast. It probably needs to be short, right? Because they've already said yes. They're there. You don't need to convince them at that point. I think some people feel like they got to put a whole trailer in the front of their podcast to re-win people to why you should stay here. Well, guess what? They came for the content. So get to it if you can. And even if that content is community content where you're just chatting back and forth with a co-host or whatever, a panel, whatever you do, get to it. Get to that part. And because that's what they've already said yes, they're listening. You don't have to win them again. I just think that's the mistake a lot of podcasters make, is they think they have to reconvince them. Don't put a trailer. First of all, don't use trailers. But second of all, don't put a trailer in the front of your podcast and go 5 minutes trying to advertise to them why they should stay. Just get to the content. They already said yes.
There was a really popular radio host in Cleveland. He was a sports guy, and it drove me nuts that his name was Mike Trevisano, and they would play promos for the Mike Trevisano show in the Mike Trevisano show. And I'm like, I am here. Like, why Mike Trevisano? And I'm like, yeah, I'm here. Could you just stop playing that and let Mike talk? So, yeah, and we are getting notes again. Here's what it is, I think. Number one, different boom arm. And the other one is, I noticed when Dave said that, is I got comfortable and sat back in my chair. And I'm not staying up to that 3-finger thing on the microphone.
It's a good reminder, though. It's a good reminder. Thanks.
So for me, the default cookie cutter intro is welcome to the name of show where we, whatever the heck you do, so you can whatever. So welcome to the Wednesday NASCAR meetup where we talk about all the drivers and all the drama in NASCAR, so you can get more out of the races. Like, what's the benefit? I always hear that's the one that people forget. Welcome to the Interesting Show, where we interview interesting people with interesting stories. Okay, so I can do what? Why should I be listening to that? And usually you can do that within a minute. So that's for me. But I know for a while on the School of Podcasting, I was starting off with a cold open. And I'd have a story like, back in the day, I was in a bar and blah, blah, blah. And then I would eventually tie it into podcasting. And what was interesting is it used to be, I had this, and we all have this, the slope, right? The ski slope that you start off and all your subscribers are just skip, or especially if you have ads, right? But this, they started, the slope kind of got a little, it wasn't quite so steep because they're like, wait a minute, he's not doing the typical thing. So yeah, the thing is, once I say what the show's about, so in the School of Podcasting, I help you plan, launch, and grow your podcast. And then on today's show, we're talking about so-and-so. So within a minute or two, you know what the show's about and what the episode is about. Because as my buddy Eric K. Johnson, the podcast talent coach, says, nobody gets on a bus without knowing where it's going. So that's my typical intro.
I was doing a live show one time, and in the chat, so I say, this is the Average Guy Network, and you found Home Gadget Geeks, show number whatever, recorded on this date. And then in the edited episode, this guitar riff comes in and plays. It's my opening guitar riff. It's 15 seconds long or whatever, and then it fades out, as I say here on Home Gadget Geeks, news, reviews, product updates, conversation, all for the average tech guy, right? So, and there had been some questions in chat. Do you do pre-recorded or do you do do you say them? Well, every show we're live first, so every intro is read live. But I read the exact same thing every time, right? You actually get better the longer you do that. Anyways, so I had this guest that I had on said, or somebody in chat was like, "Where's the music? Like, don't you play the music live?" Like, no, we add the music in post. Like that's so. While there was 15 seconds of music for this regular listener, that music had become a part of their listening experience, and they actually expect it, right? It tells them they're in the right place. It's an audio clue, like, oh, okay, settle in. Like I'm Home Gadget Geeks is up next, right? So it's just an interesting. Don't short your intro too much, because I think there can be a Pavlovian effect to your listener to say, oh, okay, right place. Let me get in the right frame of mind to be thinking about this podcast, but maybe not go on and on and on forever about what it is and all the, like I thank our Patreon subscribers up front, because I think that's important. And I have an Amazon link. I say, hey, we now have an Amazon link on the front page if you want to click on it. It's Sports Network.
Oh,
try to get through this
that. For the
really
record,
fast.
You're not allowed to say that, for the record. That's one of the reasons I got kicked out of Amazon.
Say it or put it in an email. I think they don't. I'm not sure.
I know you're not allowed to put it on the website. That's what I got kicked off for. But
really?
But that was on the website, because I just saw, I was researching Michael Butler for the Hall of Fame induction, and he's got click here to shop at Amazon and support their show. And I'm like, Michael, dude, that's exactly what I did, and it got me kicked out. So audio may be a different story, but it just seems like Amazon likes to kick people out for,
Yeah, maybe
whatever.
so. Maybe they kicked me off once, then kicked me off again.
It's
just that they're a pain to track in taxes, anyways.
Yeah.
So it's all good.
Yeah. So what I hear a lot that when somebody goes too long is they'll say, today I'm interviewing Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv because Jim is an expert in robo lawnmowers. And so that's why you let him know. And then they'll go, and in the interview, we talk about this, and we're going to talk about, wait till you hear. And they basically create a table of contents of all the questions. And I'm like, I have books behind me. I've never highlighted the table of contents. Like, I'm here, like Jim said, I'm here. I've hit play. Great. I can't wait to hear about robo lawnmowers, but can we get to those? And I hear people do that a lot. Oh, and later we're going to talk about, well, why later? Why not just talk, like, I'm here. I've hit play. And I get it. The idea is to get people hooked in, but sometimes you hook them in and then you actually lose them because you're trying to hook in somebody who's already hooked in. And you're like, no, just get to the content. So there is a whole other conversation going on in our chat room.
Oh yeah, they're having a good time out there.
Yeah, they're all they're all swapping emails and stories. It's a whole own show going on over there.
Well, that's a good community, though. I mean, I talked earlier about having a really good community, and I think we've here at Ask the Podcast Coach, we have curated a really good, active community that will take care of each other. Listen, the chat room experience. If you're listening to the podcast version of this or on YouTube and you haven't come out to join us live, you should just try it once on a Saturday morning. Come out 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. Just jump in. You don't have to stay for the whole thing, but just come out and join it. This is the chat room experience is part of the product here in being able to get live interactions and questions answered that way. And it's a great experience. So I'd encourage you. I know Dave says this all the time, but let me encourage you, come out and join us live on a Saturday morning. Yeah. I mean, especially in the winter in the Northern Hemisphere, what else do you have to do?
Nothing else. I'm not going anywhere today. Exactly.
Freezing out there.
Lane says, if you want to hear a good breakdown of an intro versus a bad one, listen to the podcast Rodeo Show, which you'll be hearing again. Can't say it enough. AskRalphPodcast.com is signed up to be on the Ralph is just like, all right, anything you could do to promote me, Dave, do it. So that's and
listen, Greatest American Hero, right? Remember the show Greatest American Hero? Okay, you know the song they have, which is it's horrible. It's a terrible song, but we all know it, right? In fact, now that I'm not going to sing it because I don't want to put an earworm in everybody's head, but Now that if you knew that, you're immediately, it's good and bad is in the eye of the beholder. And so be careful that we all don't become clones and try to do the same thing. Like, oh no, your intro has to be like
Right.
Neil Laporte does it or Joe Rogan does it or whatever, right? No, your intro should be your intro. Do it the way you want to do it, and get better at it.
Yeah, speaking of the podcast rodeo show, there's an episode I did, and this person really likes sound effects and movie clips and stuff. And I said, you know what? People either going to love your show or they're going to hate it. But that's actually kind of a good thing, because what's great is it's a Christian show, and it's pretty yuck. There's a lot of lots of comedy kind of thrown in. And I was like, you know what? I said, there was a little, for me, again, and that's all that show is. It's an opinion. I was like, maybe a little too much icing on that cake. Let's keep to the cake. But I said, the good news is you're different. You are absolutely different than any show I've heard in this genre. And I go, so I don't know if I would change too much, but if this is something you like, this is something you do. In the same way that Jim just said, just do the intro you want. Don't obsess over it too much. Sometimes having a different intro might set you apart. One of the things that's so great about, I'm inducting Michael Butler, and this guy has been podcasting since 2004, Rock and Roll Geek Show, is he hasn't changed a bit. And his whole, you know how you kind of count, like who you are is your avatar. And Mike's avatar is kind of like, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. And, oh, crap, I got to read an email, and I'm horrible at reading. And he's very self-deprecating, and it's a hilarious. But that's his style, and he's just being himself. And if he tried to be like, hey, welcome to the Rock and Roll Geek, people. All right, we're going to rock and roll. Like, try to be a Wolfman Jack thing, All right, baby, we're going to do the thing now, yeah. It's like, that's not Michael Butler. So it was sometimes just being yourself is your own style, so.
Another good impression from Dave Jackson. You keep pulling these out, and I'm always. I have one. I have Kermit the Frog or Glenn.
Or Glenn the Geek. Yeah.
That's the one I got. That's all I got. You got hundreds of them. It's awesome.
Well, when you're the youngest of three and nobody wants to play with you, you have to find a way to amuse yourself. So I was making sounds and all sorts of stuff. But it is, wow, we're actually over. Jim, what's coming up on theaverageguy.tv?
Christian Johnson of Maple Grove Partners. We mention him from time to time. He comes on, original contributor to the show. And he is back on. We talk a little bit about LastPass and Bitwarden. We had, LastPass had some problems, and we talked about moving to Bitwarden. He gives an update as well as an AI update. So it's out and available right now. You can find it at homegadgetgeeks.com.
Is that your preferred one? I just switched to 1Password, and the thing I loved about it is I imported all my stuff from LastPass, and then there are certain ones that are like, hey, you should change this one. So they kind of flagging things that came over. They're like, this one's okay, this one you should change. So
yeah, and that one's that's okay. Bitwarden's okay. So the one that the best one is the one that works for you with password managers. Yeah. So check it out, homegadgetgeeks.com.
On the School of Podcasting, it's one of those things, again, where I have like 4 ideas, and I haven't, I think we're going to talk a little bit about burnout and the fact that one of the reasons why people don't start a podcast is because they think that it's too crowded. And in the past, month, there have been 5 or 6 major YouTubers with gazillions, if not millions of listeners and viewers and subscribers, and they've all quit. And we're going to talk about why did they quit, which kind of ties into my short about, are you sure you want to do this for a living? Because they did it for a living, and they're like, this isn't as fun anymore. So we're going to talk about that and how to avoid that. And also possibly I'll throw in a hint of how to handle a troll, because trolls are fun. They're entertaining. So we are not here next week because I will be at PodFest. So no show next week, but we will see you in 2 weeks with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach. Like, subscribe, and smash the bell if you're watching on YouTube. And this is fun because I can't find the finish button. There it is. Bye, everyone.
See ya.